Talk about brutal. Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts just pummeled a Trump-supporting news anchor on CNBC. Warren lashed out at Sara Eisen, who tried to defend Trump taking away Harvard University research grants.
You know what? Instead of just mouthing off about what you think is happening, actually present some evidence. And let's look at the evidence. Let's let the other side come in and question that evidence. But you don't just get to lip off and say, and therefore the king gets to wave his magic wand and say, off with your head.
Doesn't the government determine where federal tax dollars go? And so they're allowed to decide.
Do you think they have a big bushel basket of money and they just say, you, good looking, you will have money. You, not so good looking, you're going to have to go hungry for a while. That's not how it works. Let's just do Con Law 101, and that is, Congress writes those laws and allocates that money. The administration's job is to enforce those laws and spend that money the way the law tells them. And if they fail to do that, Part 3 is the courts are the ones who step in and enforce the law.
Warren sounded like a third-grade teacher trying to simplify things for an underachieving student. And Eisen had it coming to her. Earlier during the interview, Eisen belittled Warren's efforts to assert congressional authority over tariffs. Eisen claimed, inaccurately, that Congress doesn't have that power, prompting Warren to rip her apart.
It ultimately doesn't matter.
What do you mean it ultimately doesn't matter? This is the law. I'm
because
still
it didn't
kind of
change his
Constitution
policy.
101.
No, but he has the authority, ultimately.
Well, no, he does not. That's the whole point. He does not have the authority if Congress does not let him keep this authority. We can take this away.
And to try and take it away, Warren is seeking a Senate vote. Warren, who is the top-ranking Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee, has called Trump's tariffs corrupt. She points out that Trump initially said there would be no tariff exceptions. Then, after Trump spoke with Apple CEO Tim Cook and made what Trump described as a great deal, the Trump administration exempted iPhones from the import taxes.
All of a sudden, great deal available for Tim Cook. Tim Cook, who, by the way, put $1 million.
It's a great deal available for Americans who have to buy iPhones.
No, it is a great deal for one company. But how many of the competitors now get hurt? In fact, I'd like to know what else goes on in this deal. Is it that Tim Cook and his interests get protection, but any of his competitors, I don't know, do they get a higher interest rate? What happens to them? The problem we've got here, and the thing is, Donald Trump actually has a history on this, as we point out in the letter.
Just has a good relationship with the president there.
When he is negotiating a tariff deal, he negotiates on the behalf of everybody in the United States. And to pick, you get a special deal, you get smacked in the face, it has two consequences. One is, that's just terrible. That's not how competition is supposed to work. But the second and the more pernicious here, it's like putting poison in the water. It means nobody can trust the system. There's no independence in the system. There's no fairness in the system. It's all whose palm did you grease, who did you suck up to in order to be treated better.
One person who is definitely not sucking up to Donald Trump these days is Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Powell has been blunt in connecting the weakening economy to the Trump tariffs.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth.
As a result, Powell has dismissed Donald Trump's request to lower interest rates.
We are well positioned to wait for greater clarity before considering any adjustments to our policy stance.
So Donald Trump is threatening to fire Powell.
He's too late, always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him. I let him know it, and if I want him out, he'll be out of there real fast, believe me. Yeah.
The law prevents the president from firing or replacing the Fed chair. And Jerome Powell has said he is not going to resign even if Donald Trump demands he leave. Now, back to Elizabeth Warren. The senator herself has criticized Powell through the years. But she says disagreeing with the Fed chair is one thing, threatening his job or firing him is something else, something illegal. And Warren says that such a move would tank the already battered U.S. stock markets.
If Chairman Powell can be fired by the President of the United States. It will crash the markets in the United States. The infrastructure that keeps this stock market strong, and therefore a big part of our economy strong, and therefore a big part of the world economy strong, is the idea that the big pieces move independent of the politics.
But I know you are not the president, but you have also been very vocal in terms of wanting Fed Chair Powell to cut interest rates.
Sure.
Especially when he was raising it. And you and I have talked about, like, maybe you shouldn't inject your politics into the Fed. That's essentially all he's doing here.
Oh, that's the question. When he talks about terminating Powell, come on.
No, he said his termination cannot come soon enough. His term ends next year.
You think he was saying term in? Look, I hope he was saying term in. I think what he's doing is testing the waters. Does he think he can get away with firing Powell, and all of you won't raise any hell about that? He's checking that out, and I'm just saying, for the strength of our country, I hope all of you are pushing back at this.
Sara Eisen continued to push back at Senator Warren. Eisen is reportedly viewed by the Trump White House as one of their most reliable advocates on CNBC, and she often seems to match the ignorance the Trump team has about the Constitution and the checks and balances of our government. Now, to be clear, I do think that all guests on CNBC and elsewhere should face skeptical and adversarial questions. Tough questions should punctuate every interview, whether the guest is a Republican, Democrat, or whatever. But those adversarial exchanges should be grounded in reality, not Trump talking points or misinformation. Senator Warren and other Democrats recently asked the Trump administration for some transparency on the tariffs, including a record of who is asking for special exemptions, whether the requests are going to the president, the Secretary of the Treasury, or the trade rep. So far, the Trump White House has not given any of the information requested, which makes you wonder if some of these requests and special deals are above board, or whether they amount to shakedowns and bribes. As Warren noted, until now, America has been based on the rule of law as articulated by the Constitution.
And whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, that's what serves all of us. And that's what keeps us all strong. That's what gives us a chance to build prosperity. You take that away, and it may work great for a handful of billionaires, but for everybody else in this country, for every kid who needs that public school, for every senior who needs that Social Security check, for every veteran who counts on the promise that was made to him or her, you take that away, and our country is not just a little bit poorer. Our country fundamentally breaks apart.
In these challenging times of Trump, there are several Democrats who have been stepping up in forceful and compelling fashion. Add Senator Elizabeth Warren to the list. She understands markets, trade, and the financial system as well as anybody. Warren's urgency in speaking out against Trump is noteworthy, and her willingness to blast Trump sycophants to their face on live television is inspiring.
Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
They're varying scoring on that, Senator
You're
Warren.
the Secretary of the Treasury, so I'm asking you, what is your view? Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
It is my view that over the 10-year window, it will decrease.
You know, do you have anybody who agrees with you on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask my question.
Okay.
Every credible independent expert agrees that Trump and the Republicans' big, beautiful bill would add trillions of dollars to the national debt and would not even come close to paying for itself. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the Penn-Wharton budget model, and the Yale Budget Lab all agree on this, and they're looking at 10-year windows, thank you.
Warren noted that conservative organizations have also criticized the Big Beautiful Bill Act and say it will explode the national debt. This includes the Conservative Tax Foundation and the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, and more.
Even Elon Musk and the Wall Street Journal are criticizing the bill for ballooning the national debt. The only people who are saying publicly that it's not going to add to the national debt are you, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Congress. Do you have an independent group that has put forward numbers that disagrees with all of these conservative groups and disagrees with the Wall Street Journal on this?
Well, Senator, interesting to see you aligned with Elon Musk, but if I add...
You're no more shocked than I am.
That is how witty and fast Senator Warren is. To say she is quick on her feet would be an understatement. Back to Treasury Secretary Bessent.
If we want to take the full congressional budget scoring, they predict, and I don't agree with their methodology, they predict a $2.4 trillion deficit. But
Okay, so the answer to the question is yes.
No, but may I finish? They include that, but they've also scored $2.8 trillion in tariff income. So even in Washington, D.C. math,
Okay, so-
in Washington, D.C. math, that is a $400 billion surplus.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. This bill, you admit, will increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion, but you think there will be another bill and another set of agreements that somehow materialize, haven't materialized so far, don't have any statutory authority, but that will make up the difference. So the answer to the original question, will this bill increase or decrease the deficit? I think you just said it will increase. This bill increases the deficit.
No, I want to use all the CBO scoring, and you can't take one without the other. I don't agree with the CBO.
One is the law that we are scoring, the bill that is in front of us. We don't have a tariff bill in front of us to score.
Not only is there no tariff bill to score, there are also no tariff deals yet from the Trump administration. Back in April, when Donald Trump announced his global tariffs, the Trump White House predicted there might be 90 deals in 90 days. So far, there are none. There are sub-deals or agreements in principle with China and the UK, but when it comes to comprehensive agreements that businesses, investors, and others can analyze and examine, say for tariff revenue that comes into Washington, there is nothing.
Mr. Secretary, let me go on to the second question. You have said that government spending is, quote, out of control. You have also called government spending, quote, unsustainable. In fact, in the name of fiscal responsibility, you're working with the Republicans on this big, beautiful bill to pass the biggest cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in American history. So, Mr. Secretary, help me understand here. Why is the national debt so very important that you're trying to kick 16 million people off their health insurance, but increasing the national debt doesn't seem to matter if you're cutting taxes for billionaires and billionaire corporations?
And that is arguably the best question from any member of Congress this year.
Well, first of all, a huge portion of this goes to family-owned businesses that are pass-through entities that are below that level, Senator, and I am sure you share my goals of Main Street prosperity.
You know, I'm glad to do tax cuts for people of modest means. The question I'm asking is, why does the deficit not matter to you when we're talking about knocking 16 million people off their health care?
Well, that figure is overstated by 5.1 million. That is amount not attributable to provisions in this bill.
So you think it's okay just to knock 10 million people off their health care?
First of all, let's set that straight. Work requirements account for 8 million of CBO's claim number. Again, we're creating an economy that promotes and rewards.
It's clear, Secretary Bessent, that you don't want to answer the question.
No, Senator, I am answering it.
No, you're not.
And what I want is for Medicaid to be used for mothers and children as it was meant, not for 1.4 million illegal aliens, not for able-bodied people.
Medicaid is not used for people who are not documented. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say here, the part that troubles me the most is that the Secretary is deeply worried about the deficit and is willing to knock 16 million, or as he says, merely 11 million people off their health care. Matters so much, but it doesn't matter so much if you're cutting taxes for billionaires. Then it's okay to run up a big deficit. I think that's wrong.
Wow. Elizabeth Warren knows these issues better than anybody in Washington. Her approach is direct, emphatic, and matter of fact. In other words, Trump officials like Scott Bessent don't stand a chance against Warren. Also, the Trumpsters are literally trying to defend the indefensible. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act slashes Medicaid, takes away health care from millions of people, and cuts food stamps, ensuring that some people will go hungry on top of facing financial ruin if they get sick and need medical care. At the same time, the bill gives tax cuts to the wealthy. But it gets even worse. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office just released new projections, and this graph: average annual change in household resources as a percentage of current law income after transfers and taxes 2026 to 2034. The highest or richest 10% of Americans will see their household income rise by about 3%. The lowest or poorest 10% of Americans will see their household income drop by 4%. As economist and writer Paul Krugman recently noted in his Substack, that 4% income decline for the poorest 10% of Americans is the scale of economic damage you'd expect from a severe recession. But here it is being deliberately inflicted on the poorest Americans. And as Krugman points out, the CBO doesn't even consider the effect of Trump tariffs on household incomes. And tariffs are regressive taxes. They fall more heavily on lower income families. So the 4% income decline for the poorest group of Americans could be even worse, perhaps 6 or 7%. The bottom line is that the Trump GOP bill is going to take money away from 80% of the American public. And because of tax cuts for the rich, the federal deficit is going to explode. That's why the voice of Senator Elizabeth Warren and others is so important. This stuff is going to impact all of us. And by the way, Senator Warren has hammered Trump Republicans repeatedly this year. Last month, Warren blasted CNBC host Sara Eisen, who tried to defend Trump taking away Harvard University research grants.
You know what? Instead of just mouthing off about what you think is happening, actually present some evidence. And let's look at the evidence. Let's let the other side come in and question that evidence. But you don't just get to lip off and say, and therefore the king gets to wave his magic wand and say, off with your head.
Doesn't the government determine where federal tax dollars go? And so they're allowed to decide.
Do you think they have a big bushel basket of money and they just say, you, good looking, you will have money. You, not so good looking, you're going to have to go hungry for a while. That's not how it works. Let's just do Con Law 101, and that is Congress writes those laws and allocates that money. The administration's job is to enforce those laws and spend that money the way the law tells them. And if they fail to do that, part 3 is the courts are the ones who step in and enforce the law.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Warren's urgency in speaking out against most things Trump, including his tax and spending bill, is noteworthy. And Warren's willingness to blast Trump staffers and sycophants to their face is inspiring.